most of my childhood, we were living in a house with about 60 other people.
Oh my
So
gosh.
there was a couple smaller houses where we maybe have 30 people to a house, or we had an even smaller house at one point, which we shared with just one other family and my great grandmother. By the time your child was 13, they were supposed to be broken, not obedient, broken. Like they were not supposed to have a thought for themselves. They were supposed to do what they were told right away without question. There was supposed to be no hesitation, like no freedom of thought. You were supposed to your child so consistently that the thought of doing something other than what they were told immediately was just unthinkable. I grew up my whole life believing we are like the true people of God. We're saved, we're protected. As a child, you're just scared of the outside world. These people are not saved. Most of them are probably destined to hell because they don't believe in Jesus, or Yahshua as the community would call him. It was just the outside world was a very scary place. The thought of being outside of the protection of the community was unthinkable because everything outside of it was just awful. That actually spread into a lot of bigger issues that I still deal with now, which is like I have severe food anxiety. Anything to do with food, eating, food safety, almost debilitating. Like I do not like eating. Yeah, I didn't necessarily have direct exposure to things like music or pop culture or anything like that. But just by getting to interact with some people outside of it, I definitely started at a pretty young age to be like, okay, maybe everything I've thought of the outside world is not correct. My entire life started over with a completely different set of rules at the age of 15.
Mine is the only voice.
Wow.
What have I been doing?
Lay down my autonomy.
After that, it got very dark very quickly.
Hey guys, my name is Shalise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening on those podcast platforms and you'd prefer to see our faces, you can go to YouTube at Cults to Consciousness. It means so much to us, and it's the best way to support the podcast. When you interact with the post, like, share, comment, leaving those words of encouragement for our guests means so much to them. They are real people telling their real stories, and we have the best community who always leaves such supportive comments. So thank you guys so much for doing that. So today's guest, he is the son of someone we just had on, part of the 12 tribes. You may or may not have eaten at one of the yellow delis. They have them all over the world. This is a group that you guys have been asking us to cover, and we finally found someone who was willing to speak out about it. She wrote a book, and now her son is coming on to tell his experience because she joined the cult when he was a baby. So now we get to hear the perspective of growing up in this group all the way until he was 14 years old, until his whole family left. So thank you so much for joining us, Emmet Mathieu.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, when your mom said that you would be willing to speak about it, I was so excited. I feel like some of the most horrific things going on in that group had to do with the children. And just at every point, I was stopping, being like, what? This is crazy. It's been on my mind so much lately as I've been interacting with my own daughter. And I keep saying little things to my husband, like, they weren't even allowed to do this or they weren't allowed to do that. And he's like, babe, this is really on your mind, huh? And I was like, yes, because it's such a intense thing to limit children in such a capacity. And I'm going to go into all of that, and I want to hear your perspectives. But before we do that, I guess from your perspective, can you give people who aren't familiar an idea of who the 12 tribes are?
I mean, I think after living there, I have a whole bunch of my own personal biases and what I think they were. To say it basically, it was started by a man who was the son of a Southern Baptist preacher. So, I mean, I'm sure he internalized a lot of abuse that happened to him as a child, but he seemed to be doing it as a way to get back at his dad. He had a big thing against Christianity. The thing was, when all was said and done, he very much emulated a lot of the same things you see in kind of the Southern Baptist society. So very abusive, specifically towards children, very racist, misogynistic. I think he became everything he hated in his father in his attempt to get back at him. There are people who believe he was potentially doing some kind of a social experiment because he had gone to college for that, for psychology and stuff. So there was an idea that he might have set this all up just kind of to see how far he could push people and see what he could get them to do.
What?
I'm not sure. Those are, those are things that get thrown around. Those are accusations that are made. I think they track. I think they came from people who were kind of in his inner circle at the beginning. So I don't think it's outlandish to say that that's a potential.
Yeah. And he has since passed, right?
Yeah, I think that was maybe 5, 6 years ago now. I believe it was during COVID. So he did
Okay.
pass. And his wife kind of took over his role despite that not being something that any other woman there would be allowed to do, be in a leadership position. It kind of seemed like she always had kind of the inside scoop. She kind of seemed to run the show from the background, and that was more or less confirmed when he died because she took over. So again, I'm not totally sure the motives behind it all, but the baseline is it was a very religious, controlling cult. They basically used the Bible as a weapon. It was highly controlled people. They were very literal with its interpretation. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great description. And I'm shocked that his wife took over. That is absolutely insane. Having read your mom's book and knowing how they treat women, which is basically less than, I am so surprised that someone didn't stop that. But I guess how could you if she's the wife of the leader? Oh my gosh, my words.
Right, right.
So, yeah, that's extremely surprising to me. And it was started in the 70s for full context for everybody. It's not something that's been around a very long time. But when you go into one of these societies, I assume it looks like you're looking back in time, very strict standards of dress, women wearing those harem pants, long tunics covering the bum, men in strict clothing as well. And what your mom was saying is they purposely wanted to stand out and look, quote, peculiar. So people would ask who they are and what they're doing and try to draw people in. So I find that really interesting. And it's communal living too, because I don't know if we mentioned that.
Yeah, well, very very communal living. It's something I like to tell people to get that quick shock reaction. Most of my childhood, we were living in a house with about 60 other people.
Oh my
So
gosh.
there was a couple smaller houses where we maybe have 30 people to a house, or we had an even smaller house at one point, which we shared with just one other family and my great grandmother. But it wasn't like you had your own bedroom. Like families would have a bedroom or two.
Yeah, it almost feels similar to the FLDS with Warren Jeffs having a whole bunch of wives all in one household with all kids, except in this scenario, everyone is very separate.
Yeah.
So, your mom wanted to join because she thought that she was joining a simpler life. She thought that it was going to be, back in the olden days where you cook everything from scratch and it's a community. It takes a community to raise a child, and it's very wholesome, is how she talked about it in her book. And so she was sucked in when you were just a baby. So now I'm really interested to hear from your perspective what it was like actually growing up there. So if you could maybe start us off with a few of your earliest memories.
I have a very good memory. So I remember things from when I was, 2 or 3 years old, just a couple of years after we'd moved in. I think as a child, you don't question where you are. We're with your parents, you do what they do, and it's normal. I kind of compare it to you look at kids growing up in like a war zone in the Middle East. Like that's what they know. We, from an outside perspective, feel very bad for them, but they might not necessarily know the difference. And that's kind of how it felt for me as a child, as a young child. It was just life. I cook dinner with my mom. We'd maybe go to the park, go sledding. I remember being very young, going out back, and we had a little, like a little ball we would throw over the volleyball net. So at that point, I wouldn't say my life was too insane. So at the point I was getting ready to go into what they would have called training, which should have been about 5 years old. That's when things picked up a little more to being like the corporal punishment stuff, like when they really started trying to like train me and make me an obedient child. I wouldn't have been allowed to go to training if I wasn't going to be obedient to my teachers. So if I wasn't being perfectly obedient to my parents, all that kind of stuff. So they basically decided, I don't know if it was my parents or the teachers, but they decided I wasn't like ready to go to training at 5. So all of my friends went in a year ahead of me. Even at that age, I definitely remember feeling like not looked down on, but kind of like picked on, like, "Ooh, you weren't ready. You still need your mommy," that kind of thing. So that would have been about a year of that. I remember one very traumatic event in that time period where I was cooking lunch with my mom, Already at this age, I was like, I had the ability to read a recipe and make stuff with my mom. So like I remember basically putting together an entire pot of chili for the 90 people in our community. We soaked the beans the night before, so I'd measure out all the spices, get everything put in the pot. But I don't remember all the details. I just remember someone deciding I had been disrespectful to my mom. And I think she was probably dealing with my sister as well, trying to finish lunch. I don't know. But this person took me from my mom, took me to their bedroom, uh, disciplined me in a very, very harsh manner. So harsh to the point that my grandmother, who was at that point had moved in with us, I believe, found me, took me back from them. It's like, why would you do that to my grandson? The interesting thing about that is when I brought this up years and years later after we'd left, and was like, hey, remember when this happened? My mom had a completely different memory of it. So I remembered a man taking me from her, bringing me back to his bedroom. It was, way over the top in my memory. He had me take all my clothes off. We had to wear our hair in like a long ponytail. So he made me take that out because he said if I wasn't being respectful to my mom, then I wasn't under like the protection, the covering of God. So basically I was supposed to like feel shame. So like as a symbolic thing of me not being covered, I like had to like take my hair down, take my clothes off, all this stuff. I mean,
Jeez.
he spanked me like beyond spanking. Like we're talking like beating. Keep in mind I'm like 5 years old. And it was like so harsh that at the end he like put moisturizer on me to like help with the healing process.
Jeez.
So that's definitely something I remembered very like that was just something that stuck with me that was hard to live with, So when I
Yeah.
brought this up, when I finally was like an adult and I'm like, I don't feel weird about this. I don't feel like shame about talking about it with my parents, whatever. I brought that up and she's like, yeah, but it wasn't him that took you, it was his wife. And I'm like, that seems like a really big disconnect in my own head. Like, did I make it him because I liked her? Because she didn't seem like an unsafe person. Like I felt like her husband was the unsafe one. Like, is that something my brain twisted? Did it happen multiple times and she doesn't even know about the time he took me?
Yeah. That's
I
where
don't
my
know.
head went because I feel like this abuse that's disguised as obedience happened consistently. At least from the perspective of your mom, the way she wrote about it, it was every little thing you had to spank your child for. And you would keep the switch in your pocket. You would sew a pocket into your clothes so that you could hit your child. And it just seemed so overwhelming and so much for a child. And how is any child supposed to actually internalize and understand what's going on when their brains can't comprehend at that age why they're being hit? It just makes them afraid. And so it makes people think, oh no, they're compliant, but they're just afraid. They're
Yeah.
just scared to do anything. They're not obedient.
That was something they specifically wrote in their teachings on child rearing. By the time your child was 13, they were supposed to be broken. Not obedient, broken. Like they were not supposed to have a thought for themselves. They were supposed to do what they were told right away without question. There was supposed to be no hesitation, like no freedom of thought. It was like you were supposed to beat your child so consistently that the thought of doing something other than what they were told immediately was, just unthinkable.
Mm-hmm.
They were not supposed to have their own thought process by the time they were 13 years of age. Like when you became a teenager, you were supposed to be following in the footsteps of your parents and there was no question. So for someone like me, who my entire childhood, I was just seen as like a rebellious, like obstinate child, that oftentimes meant I was getting spanked probably like 10 plus times a day. I wasn't with my parents most of the time. So most of the time that was my teachers, that was other people. And I will say my parents didn't take these things as far as other people did. They just weren't abusive people. Like they did what they had to do to not get in trouble, but other people like enjoyed it. Like it was,
Oh, that's awful.
I don't know. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah, it just provides that environment for people who do have a tendency towards violence or people who are sadistic and want to do that to children. And it just gives them a safe space to do whatever they want because no one's going to bat an eye at it. It's not only encouraged, it's not only accepted, it's encouraged. And so that's an incredibly dangerous place for a child. And the fact that they're not even trying to be sneaky about the wording and they're saying, yeah, we want to break these children is
Yeah.
absolutely insane to me when they claim to be the only people living God's religion correctly, the only people doing it right, the only people who are going to be saved. And here they are doing this to children. It just doesn't make sense. And I know your mom also talked about how hard it was for her and how she didn't want to do that. But your example proves perfectly how if she doesn't discipline her children, someone else will. And there's nothing she can do about it because that's what's expected.
Right.
Some of the things that I remember your mom talking about, and I want to see if you have any memories around this because they were just so, all of this stuff stuck out to me. So I'm going to list a few things and then you tell me if that jogs any memories. So the part about how you're not allowed to play or say the word play, go play with your blocks, for example, is what she said. The parent would have to go over there and say, let's work with blocks because they don't want to have this distinction between work and play. Let's work with blocks, but you weren't allowed to just go play with the blocks. She had to say, okay, now stack the green ones. Okay, now stack. Everything had to be exactly what your mother wanted. And as I'm sitting here playing with my daughter, who's 17 months old, I love it when she goes in independent plays. I'm like, please go explore,
Mhm.
use your imagination, just do whatever you want to do because I want her to figure out the world. And if I was there every single step of the way, she wouldn't learn how to be independent at all. And I know that was the goal. So, do you remember things like that where you wanted to do something on your own and then you were told, no, you have to do it my way?
So probably not that specific instance. I definitely remember the thing of like playing wasn't allowed because playing wasn't productive. We were supposed to be like building the church and giving Jesus something to come back to. So if we weren't working, if we weren't constantly being productive, then we were basically worthless. So there was definitely the language thing of like, we don't say we're gonna go play. We say we're gonna work. We say we're gonna like whatever we do, it's gonna be productive. It's gonna be either physically productive in the terms of making money to survive, or it's gonna be spiritually productive in the terms of we're like preparing our souls.
Yeah.
So the things I remember having my creativity stolen, um, which would be I've always been very into creative writing. It was my favorite course in school. I've always been very adventurous. I've always liked exploring. I did not have any kind of pop culture references for any of this stuff. So everything I wrote was based on my own experiences of exploring in the woods, going on hikes, my friends and I. So I had started writing these kind of fantastical stories of scenarios where my friends and I would have to save the day. That had been going on for maybe a year. I had a notebook full of these just like childish adventure stories. And the last one I wrote, we had just had a huge snowstorm. My friends and I had a great time in it, but I took it a step further. And in the story I wrote, our whole town had been snowed in. We didn't have access to food or water. We were all like starving, and it was like a disaster snowstorm. And so in my story, my friends and I got snowshoes and we hiked like over a mountain, and we met up with a rescue helicopter that couldn't fly in because of the weather. So we had to pull back this barrel of food. And when we got back, like we were the talk of the town. Everyone was so happy because we brought them food and we saved their families, and just like a silly little story. But that story basically prompted them to remove the person who was currently my teacher at that point because she was letting us get away with self-glorification. I was no longer allowed to write those kind of stories, and everything I wrote going forward from there had to be based on the Bible. I could only kind of dramatize Bible stories. I could only creatively write about biblical characters. So I was not allowed to write about myself. I was not allowed to write any stories in which we were the heroes because we were supposed to be not drawing attention to ourselves, not looking for attention, not looking for glory. So yeah, from that point on, I was no longer allowed to write creatively, write fiction, write adventure stories. So I just kind of had that taken away from me just because, like, I was glorifying myself.
Oh my gosh, that whole don't be prideful thing. I had a sliver
Yeah,
of that in Mormonism, growing up in Mormonism, but not to that extent. I feel like that would be a positive trait where you're writing stories where you're helping people not
right.
perish in a snowstorm. It seems like a positive thing. and they twist it and make you feel wrong about that. I'm sure that affected also your mentality of, oh, should I not be thinking about helping other people? Or, just all these unnecessary things that are demonizing you and your creativity. I want to hear more about the schooling. So it was all isolated system, no public school, their own schools. So what was it like? What do you remember? Some of your memories from school?
My biggest class, I think, was like 6 students. It was separated out in grades. The grades were all named after the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, 1 through 12. See, I started when I was 6. I went through a bunch of different teachers. They always, had reasons to pull teachers, whether it was because they weren't strict enough or whatever. There was very little stability with that. There was a lot of, differently temperamented people, which when it came to the whole discipline thing was a roller coaster. There was just, the rules would constantly change and you'd never know whose rule you were breaking. When I had first gone in, I remember a big thing that happened. We had like a jar of beans, 2 jars of beans, and we would take a bean out at the beginning of the day and put it into the other jar, and we were learning how to count the days of the month. I think we counted down. So for whatever reason, we were doing the bean for day 4. And my teacher was like, "Why did you say 5, Emmett? It's 4." And I was like, "I didn't." And that right there, she heard me say 5. So me talking back, me saying I didn't, I was lying. So, that kicked off all the discipline. She started in on it, trying to get me to admit that I had said 5, but that's just not me. So I wouldn't say I had said 5. I was adamant about it. I did not say 5. So I got kicked out of school. I got sent home. My parents were expected to discipline me until I confessed to saying 5. So that was kind of my introduction to schooling. My teacher
Jeez.
calling me a liar, getting kicked out of school, and I probably had 4 or 5 days worth of consistent discipline until finally I started questioning my own self. Like, well, maybe I did. Like, I don't know. To this day, I don't know if I did or not, because that was basically 5 days of torture until I apologized for saying 5 when I was sure I hadn't. So I guess I was 6 years old. That was my first year into school because I wasn't allowed to go in when I was 5. Other than that, I mean, it was school. We did a 4-day school week, but we did it year round. So we didn't have summer break. We didn't have breaks for any holidays. It was
Oh
just 4
man.
days, 4 days a week, all through my entire childhood, which I will say has its benefits because you don't have to catch up on stuff. I was very accelerated in my coursework. By the time I came out here and tried to get into public school, I was about 3 years ahead of my age as far as grade went, which gave me the opportunity to actually go into a grade 3 grades below where I was, or 2 grades. So I had a couple extra years to play sports. We'd have our morning gathering or service, whatever you want to call it. We'd eat breakfast, and then I'd walk up to the training house with my teacher and my classmates, and then we'd be there till lunchtime. We'd come back down the hill. It's all on the same property. Eat lunch, go back up until I want to say like 3 in the afternoon, and then you come back down, have a couple hours with my mom, and then after like the workday was over, would be preparation time, where we were supposed to sit down for an hour, read the Bible, read our little our news publication that we had within the community, and then we'd go to the evening service. So that was kind of like how the day would have been laid out for schooling. But yeah, small classes. We had our own. It wasn't our own curriculum. We took other people's curriculum and then kind of reworked it for our purposes because everything had to be biblical names. Everything had to be biblical references. We didn't strictly do like history. We had like a current events class, but our history was the history of like Israel. So our history was all like biblical history, not necessarily like world history.
Yeah. Did you learn American history?
Bits and pieces. And it was all very twisted because, like, we learned that the Civil War was the war of Northern aggression. We didn't like we learned it from the Southern racist perspective, not from reality. So
Yeah. I'm sure there were a lot of things once you left that clicked into place and all of this rewriting of history in your brain going, wait a second, what's even real out here in the world?
no, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have had that experience. Like I said, I was always seen as kind of like an obstinate and stubborn person. So if I didn't feel right about something, I took it upon myself to educate myself, which was,
Hmm.
I think my mom probably put that in her book. I actually haven't brought myself to read her entire book yet for a couple of reasons. It's hard to relive some stuff. Also, that's a very personal account by my own mom, so.
Yeah, that's understandable.
But yeah, so I did a lot of reading that I wasn't supposed to do. I was very obsessed with like the founding fathers, the Revolutionary War. Obviously, that kind of morphs into the Civil War. I educated myself in areas that I wasn't supposed to have been.
Yeah, how did you actually do that?
With the help of my parents. Somewhere along the lines, I got some kind of children's book about Benjamin Franklin or something, and it caught my full attention. It was my everything. It was all I wanted to know about. From there, they got me some kind of biography about George Washington. So I got way into that, and I got way into like his spying. So, it was just little bits here and there, whatever they could get away with giving me. Obviously, I wasn't allowed to tell anybody about it.
That's what I was going to say. If someone knew about this, would you have gotten in trouble?
Yeah, and I did. Not specifically about those things. Someone else there who was also more on the lenient side knew that my parents let me read books, and she gave me The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, and that got found out. She was like cut off, which is the community version of like being shunned. Yeah, I mean, I was in trouble. It wasn't like in the same way as if I had done something, because like someone gave it to me. It wasn't like I had gone out there and stolen it from the library or something myself, but it was definitely like a problem.
Mhm.
I remember it being a big deal.
Yeah. Let's talk about your friendships within this group or lack thereof, because one of the other rules that struck me was that children weren't supposed to talk to each other. And I'm thinking, how are you going to keep kids from speaking to each other? That's crazy. And the reasoning behind it was you're supposed to have your child do your will and not their will, which would be talking to their friends and making them unproductive. And so, how did that actually work in practice?
Not good. I mean,
It
you
didn't.
you can't keep kids from talking to each other, and I
Yeah.
definitely had less social interaction with my peers than anyone else that I know, for sure. Like,
Why is
because
that?
because it was a rule there. Like, they had to try to follow that rule and keep us separated. But whether it was passing notes, write each other notes on the undersides of our desks, because like we shared desks with different classes. So like we had desk mates that we would write notes to in pencil so they could easily be erased. We had note drop spots. That was more if you liked a girl or something. We had set up like, because like I said, I had read the whole thing about George Washington and his spying. So I learned a lot of ways to sneak messages from that.
Wait, I need to know more about hiding notes.
Yes, so we would set up a series of drop spots, and they would change weekly so that if one got found out, it wouldn't be like they could find it again, because I think we had like 7 or 8 different locations, and they were all like coded to what day of the week it was. There was a girl I liked, and we had a couple different ways of talking. So our drop spots were one. We also would use her little brother as kind of like a liaison to take stuff back and forth, because like she was allowed to talk to her brother, and her brother was younger than me and would like help me do work and stuff. So like we were both allowed to talk to him separately. So it wasn't that hard to fold up a little note, hand it to him, and have him do the transfer. Because beyond the kids not being allowed to talk to each other, there was to be like 0 interaction between boys and girls. Like that was strictly off the table. Another one, we had got these things. You know what an Alpha Smart is?
No.
It was like a tool that reporters used back in like the early 2000s, I think. It's like, it has like a keyboard, but there's like a very small screen. So you can write full documents on this thing, but you can only ever see about 6 lines of text at one time. So there are 13 storable documents on this thing. Our teacher had got them so we could learn how to type. But we all had our own personal ones that we'd take home and practice typing on. So what we figured out we could do is we could go to like a specific document, like just say we pick 7, and then we would give each other like a certain amount of down clicks. So like you go document 7, you click down 50 times, that would bring you to the 50th line down. And then that's where we would start our messages to each other. Anyone picking up the Alpha Smart, they could go through all 13 documents, and unless they scroll down 50 lines on document number 7, they're never going to see what we wrote to each other.
Yeah.
So we would do that. Whether it was my male friends, because we weren't allowed to like wrestle. Like wrestling was not allowed. But we're teenage boys with testosterone. Like we're gonna we weren't allowed to play sports. We weren't allowed to do all this stuff. So like we'd sneak off to the basement. We had like made ourselves like this little wrestling ring in the basement. We'd sneak off down there whenever someone wasn't looking and like have a little 5-minute wrestling match. And then same with girls, like, if we had a good way, maybe we'd pass a note and be like, at a certain time, we're both gonna sneak off from wherever we are and we're gonna meet up in the basement. And for me, like the big taboo is like I'd hold her hand or we'd give each other a hug. Like that was what we were sneaking off to do. So
Yeah. So you had a crush in there. Did you think that because you left when you were 14, and I know that at least when I was 14, I was coming up with all sorts of, well, he'll be my husband and my last name will be this. So did you have any thoughts of, I'm going to marry this person, or did you want to get out?
So I didn't actually know we were leaving until the night before we left.
Mm.
So when I was an early teenager, yeah, for sure. I didn't have a lot of options either. Like there were, I think, 4 girls in my age range in our entire community, and one of them was my sister. So my options were the 3 girls that none of the other guys were interested in because they were all interested in my sister. And I did. It wasn't like there was just really nobody for me. But then a girl did move in there. 2 girls actually, same year. So I didn't just have a crush. There was a whole love triangle. But
Wait a second. There was a love triangle.
we were 13 years old, so it was all just silly, childish stuff. But I mean, yeah, you can't regulate feelings. You can't regulate hormones. You can't regulate children who are trying to figure out the world and their bodies, and
Yeah.
it's impossible. I mean, you can try, but people are gonna figure stuff out.
Yeah.
I was never someone who went out of my way to like be bad. I was just seen as bad because I didn't follow rules. Like I was kind of obstinate and I didn't back down. There were kids there who were sneaking off to like have sex with the neighbor, and they were like over there for days on end, like drinking and stuff.
What?
That wasn't me at all. Like the worst I ever did was sneak off to the basement to hold the girl's hand.
Yeah.
It's definitely impossible to regulate that stuff.
Yeah. It seemed like kids got these jobs early on. Like you said, you were making full pots of chili by the time you were 5 and 6. So when did you get like an actual job? Was it hard labor, or what do you remember about your duties as a kid?
I worked the first time I remember being on a job site, I was 2.
2?
And that actually ended with me shooting myself in the knee with a nail gun.
Huh, no.
So, yeah,
Oh.
that was my first job site experience. I was doing just like baseboard trim with my dad in our own house, but like it was a construction site at the time.
Yeah.
We were remodeling the entire house. And yeah, it was just like a trim nailer that had no safety, and I picked it up and pulled the trigger, and it shot the nail into my knee.
Did they take you to get medical attention, or did they try to fix it themselves?
No. I mean, I don't remember it being like a traumatic wound. I don't think it like actually impaled my knee. Like it just hit my knee. So yeah, like I kind of remember working with my dad. I don't remember like hurting myself. So it couldn't have been too traumatic. But the point being, like I was on these sites working since I was very, very young. I would have done work on, well, not weekends because Saturday was the Sabbath, which we didn't work on at all. But then Sunday, I would have been working the whole day. I definitely remember doing things like drywall jobs, like deck repair jobs, and these were like paid jobs at clients' houses. This wasn't like our own personal house. That would probably have been when I was maybe 6, 8, 10. I would have been assisting with those kind of things. And then we had a large farm. I had a chore morning or evening, so I was taking care of the animals, milking the goats, whatever. Also, vegetable farming. We had about 7 acres of field that was all cultivated for various vegetables. My friends and I, like, we put a deer fence around that entire 7-acre field at one point. I don't remember what year that was or how old I was. So it was always something. And then when I was 12 was when they decided that my high school curriculum was like satisfactory. So they removed me from full-time schooling at 12, and I was supposed to work on the production facility where they made like soaps and lotions and stuff for private label companies. And at that point, I think 12 was the first time I worked an all-night shift. I was immediately expected to work between like 8 and 10 hours a day minimum, because a lot of times we'd go back after our evening service and work well into the night. So, there were many nights the last couple of years I was there where, I'd get up, I'd maybe do 2 hours or something in the morning of schooling, and then I'd be expected to be on that production line the rest of the day. We'd have our service, dinner, and then it'd be back to work, and then I'd work clear through the night and have to just go about my day the next day without any sleep.
Jeez. Were you getting any sort of payment or stipend for this work?
No.
It was just expected because it was all communal. It all went back to the community, or it was supposed to.
Every penny we made went back into a common pot, and the leaders decided who needed what. It bought us our food. If I had needed like shirts or something, my mom would have put that on the list of community needs, and then whoever was entrusted with need shopping would buy me whatever shirts they thought I should get.
Mm-hmm.
No compensation for my time worked whatsoever, no.
Wow. So you had some exposure to the outside world if you're doing these job sites at other people's homes. What are you thinking when you're seeing how other people are living?
So that's probably when I started having my own personal disconnect. As a child, you're just scared of the outside world. Like, these people are not saved. Most of them are probably destined to hell because they don't believe in Jesus, or Yeshua, as the community would have called him. It was just, the outside world was a very scary place. People got killed all the time. People got murdered all the time. It was just like the thought of being outside of the protection of the community was unthinkable, because everything outside of it was just awful. Mm-hmm. So yeah, when I started going out, and we had friends within our local community, not the community, but within like the township. We had people who we interacted with who were friends of the community. And when I started interacting with these people, with their children, I'm like, these are just normal, nice people. Like, they're happy to see me. They offer me food. Their houses are nice. Like, they're just normal people. It's not like some evil boogeyman out there. So yeah, I would say that's probably when the disconnect started to happen in my own head, where I'm like, I grew up my whole life believing we are like the true people of God. We're saved. We're protected. We're, like, we're this safe space. And then I'm like, a lot of times I feel more comfortable when I go over to the neighbors. We had 2 neighbors whose house bordered our property. And I, for the life of me, do not know why my dad let me do this. But one day he let me walk through their backyard and just go hang out at their house. I don't even know how old I was. They had just had a kid. So like, he was a baby. And like, I just went and hung out with this woman and her brand new baby. Like, I don't know why he let me do it, but it was just so like calm, and the house was empty. It was just her and her son and me, and it was just like nice. So yeah, I didn't necessarily have direct exposure to things like music or pop culture or anything like that, but just by getting to interact with some people outside of it, I definitely started at a pretty young age to be like, okay, maybe everything I've thought of the outside world is not correct. Yes, that was when I was younger. We didn't move after I was 4. So I don't really remember the initial moves. And those are the big moves from like, we moved from Hyannis, Massachusetts to Plymouth, Massachusetts, then to Rutland, Vermont. And that's kind of where my first real memories are, Rutland. And then from Rutland, we moved to Cambridge, New York, and then we stayed there for 11 years. So Cambridge was really all I knew. But within the Cambridge community, we bounced houses a lot. So probably once a year, just to like shake everybody up, they'd move you to a different house. They had a house on the farm, they had a house downtown, and then there was like what they called the caretaker's house, which the place I grew up had been like a mansion. So they had, the people who owned it before had like live-in servants, and then they had like a groundskeeper house. So we'd bounce around between these 3 houses, like probably once a year we'd get moved. So there was a lot of just constant upheaval. Like, I ended up learning to keep everything I own basically in one tote. So I had like a dresser for my clothes, and then anything else I had lived in one tote, because it was just so much easier to move that than like, have stuff.
Yeah, that's a lot for a kid, because they thrive on stability and schedules. I know you had really intense schedules, but just that constant, I don't know if I'm going to be able to be in this place for much longer, or I don't know if I'm going to be around the same people, or even just living in a space with new people is going to be a big change, just getting used to the people that are surrounding you.
Oh yeah, because I mean, within your own community, you pretty much know all these people like a giant extended family. But it definitely changes dynamics when you're actually in the house with them, or whether they're on the other end of town and you know only see them a few times a week. And then you'd have the really big things where like you find out some new families moving in, and like you don't know these people, you don't know these children, and it's definitely a huge upheaval because there really is no stability to begin with. So you kind of cling to every bit you have, and then right when you're feeling comfortable, they rip it out.
Yeah.
And that actually spread into a lot of bigger issues that I still deal with now, which is like I have severe food anxiety. Anything to do with food, eating, food safety, almost debilitating. Like I do not like eating. Part of that is just because of how poor the diet was, I think, growing up. It wasn't very nutritious. It never tasted good. So I never looked forward to eating. It was like something I did to survive. But then every time we did have a meal, there would be between 30 and 60 other people in that very same room. So it was very loud. You know, you can't even hear yourself think. And like I see videos now of people, where you put your fingers in your ears and you move them in and out when there's a lot of noise and it's like wah 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 wah. Talking about how that's like, stimming for like someone with ADHD or something like that. And I'm like, it just instantly, I just remember being in that room with all these people, just like so uncomfortable, so insecure, doing that just to like have something happening in my own head because I can't even like hear my own thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
As a creative person, as someone who's in that ADHD vein, it was definitely like meal times were a hard thing because it was just so much noise and it was so uncomfortable. I didn't want to be there. And then even worse, we would have these like events that would span multiple communities. Say there's going to be some big event in the community in Bellows Falls, Vermont. Everyone from Cambridge, New York, Oak Hill, New York, 3 or 4 different communities, everyone would go to one community for like a weekend. So now it's not just the 90 people you pretty much know as family. Now you're talking 300-400 people. You're staying in tents. You're all sharing the same few bathrooms. Like for me, I didn't know who was making the food, where it was coming from, how long of a time it's spent in the back of some hot van on the way from who knows where. These events were just terrifying, and I would just go the entire weekend without touching food. It's a big problem for me because I have hypoglycemia. And routinely throughout my childhood, I would like faint from lack of food. So these massive events were just like, I just dreaded anything to do with them. So now I have a very hard time traveling, going to concerts or sporting events, anything like that, anything to do with food. It just triggers like this panic anxiety in me.
Yeah. What were some of the things they were serving, or some of the main staples, go-tos?
They were basically like vegetarian, but it was beyond that because like there was meat and protein, like cheese, that kind of stuff, but it was just very sparse. Like if we had like chicken, if we had the chicken noodle soup for 90 people, there would be one chicken in it.
Oh, geez.
So when you got your bowl of chicken noodle soup, you'd have one little grizzly piece of chicken and then just, watery broth, a few noodles, and like some celery. Like what you see them serve people in prison when you're watching a movie. It's just like slop. They were very into alternative grains. So we ate millet, which you most commonly see in like birdseed. That we were like mandated to eat at least 3 mornings a week. And then with the leftovers from those breakfasts, we had to make at least 2 lunch or dinners. So we ate tons of that. The big treats we would get would be like Friday nights, we'd have a big dinner and we'd have like applewood smoked mackerel, or maybe we'd have like lasagna like once every few months.
Mm-hmm.
So just a very like sparse diet. I remember working 8 or 10 hours or whatever it was, and then I'd come home for dinner and it'd be like half of a baked potato and a bowl of lettuce. As a teenage boy who's growing rapidly, you just kind of feel your heart sink because you just know that's not gonna do it.
Yeah, and that's a huge difference compared to the Yellow Deli, where they're making these beautiful amazing meals for people.
Yeah.
And then people on the outside, me, I went into them like, wow, is this how these people are eating all the time? But it's not.
No, no. But yeah, we weren't allowed to sample the food even. Like we'd get like the leftovers. We'd get like the tea that hadn't been consumed for the day that wasn't able to be served the next day, like that gets sent home. We'd get like the hardened like bread ends. We'd bake this beautiful, amazing, delicious bread that would sell amazing at the deli. But then if you wanted a snack at home, you'd be getting like the crust end of a rye loaf, and we weren't allowed to have butter, so you'd put like a little bit of olive oil and some sea salt on it, and like that was your snack. Yeah,
Yeah.
anything good that the restaurants made, like we were not allowed to have it. That was for basically the way we were told. That was for the purpose of evangelizing. We were trying to draw in people, so we weren't
Yeah.
allowed to touch that because this was stuff for people outside the community to want to come into our establishment.
Hmm. It was a bait and switch.
Basically, yeah.
So, as the oldest, were you entrusted with helping to raise your siblings because you have three younger siblings?
Yes, when it came to basic care, I definitely changed my brother's diapers. We didn't use disposable diapers, so I definitely remember like taking down the pail of dirty cloth diapers and hand washing them all in the sink. I gave my brother his bath every night. My brother was probably the only one I was old enough to like be a big help with because at that point I was like 9. So my other siblings, I would have just been too young to be of much help. But it goes beyond that because, like I said, in a community of 90 people where you live with these people, they're all family. Yes, I helped with my brother, but more so I would say I helped with other people's children. I think the year before we left, I had been given a position for a little while as like what would have been a substitute teacher for what they called toddler training, which was like pre-K. So I did help care for those kids during the day.
What did toddler training look like?
I mean, it was just your basic pre-K, sticking the right shape block in the right hole, playing with musical instruments. Just, they were toddlers. We just did puzzles and toddler stuff. Nothing crazy. But, like, obviously it's different in there because you have all the child training rules you have to deal with. But from within the perspective of the community, child training teaching was just like, you just hang out with the kids.
So, were you expected to discipline these kids?
There were a few times I remember like the teacher would have her hands full with somebody and somebody else would be acting up and she'd be like, take care of that. So, I mean, yeah, I guess to answer plainly, yes.
Oh, man. So, when you left, you had lived in Florida and they were going to tell you to move back up. And so you went to this new state. What was it like being out of your original place where you grew up?
It was incredible. That was the first time I'd done really anything. Like, I had gone on some trips, but they were like maybe 3 days max. So, actually, like, going somewhere specifically with just my own family was like exhilarating. And looking back, my parents at that point had probably pretty much decided to leave. Because when we went down there, we took 2 weeks to get down there, and we went camping along the way. We went sightseeing. My dad had downloaded a bunch of like videos and stuff on his computer so we could have something to watch in the car. So like we were watching like old 80s and 90s TV shows, listening to audiobooks. He let me listen to the radio on his phone. So a lot of stuff I had been doing previously anyway before that, but like for the first time, it was like he was just like, we're alone. We can do what we want. Have at it.
Yeah, that's kind of surprising too because your dad was in leadership. And so now here he is intentionally breaking the rules for his kids, being like, just whatever.
Right, which is what I'm saying. Like, I feel like looking back, I can see now where they decided, like, we're gonna kind of test the waters a little bit and see if we're ready to get out of here. But I had no idea that at the time. In my head, we had basically been told I was rebellious and obstinate. I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. I wasn't preparing for my bar mitzvah. My parents had basically failed in raising me because I was 14, 15 years old and I still wasn't broken. They were going to strip my dad of all of his leadership roles. He was going to lose his car, his phone, his access to his credit cards. He was going to lose access to every privilege he had been granted as a leader. And they were going to move us back to Rutland, which I mean, I hated Rutland, like, with a passion. Leaving for Florida, there were two sides to it. I was excited to be getting out and getting to go somewhere I'd never been before and, like, have this experience, but also I knew when it was over, I was going to be basically being put in prison. I told my dad, if we move to Rutland, like, I am running away. I had planned with the brother of the girl I liked that if we got separated, if our two families got separated, or if they moved us to Rutland, we were both going to run away. We were going to meet up in somewhere in the Green Mountains, and we were basically going to, like, rough it in the woods. That was our plan. That was my plan for getting out. We were going to, like, be survivalists in the Green Mountains because we weren't going to let them separate us, and we weren't going to let them put us in prison.
It's so interesting too. I just have to point out that as kids, your brain was, it's safer in the mountains where we have to forage and build our own shelter than to just go into society and ask for help or find a job, or like, that's how afraid you were of the outside world, that you would rather be in the mountains.
At that point, I don't think it was a fear thing. It was just I wouldn't have known how to integrate into society. We were too
Yeah.
young. We were too young to legally be away from parental guidance. And looking back, like, my uncle lives like 30 minutes from Rutland. Like, it would have been so much easier for me to just go to my uncle's house. He would have taken care
Yeah.
of me. I don't know why that didn't cross my mind. But we were very self-sufficient. I knew how to fish. I knew how to build a fire. Like, I just felt like my friend and I would have been able to make a go of it. Like, I don't know. It felt like freedom. It felt like freedom without having to integrate into a society I knew nothing about.
Yeah. And I didn't know that your dad was going to be stripped of all of that because of you.
That brings up another point, that I've lived my whole life feeling like everything that happened to my family was because of me. So I could be projecting a little bit on that. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't all to do with me. I'm sure it had something to do with him and the fact that he maybe broke some rules he shouldn't have because he was more worried about caring for people and keeping people happy than he was about following the rules. So I'm sure it had something to do with him too. But I mean, from my parents deciding to move into the community because they just had me, and my mom was freaked out about school because of the Columbine shooting and all this stuff. It's like my birth was the catalyst for them moving in. And again, when I had a year-long depression and was literally ready to run off and live in the woods by myself, they again uprooted my siblings' lives, who at the time I didn't know how my siblings felt about it. It was all they knew. When my parents told me that we were leaving, like, I had two thoughts. One's like, yes, I'm free. The other is like, how are my siblings feeling? Like, they're being taken away from their lives, their friends. What if they still believe that they're going to hell? Like, all this stuff. And I'm like, can you see how, like, I felt like they went there because of me? They're leaving because of me. Any instability I'm causing to my family is because I didn't do what I was supposed to do. So yeah, that definitely was a heavy weight trying to leave. I think that was probably one of the hardest things to get over. At that point, I and myself had decided the community's not right. The community's not God's people. This is not what they claim it to be. But still at the back of my mind, I'm like, but if it is, have I just condemned my entire family?
That's a heavy weight. Absolutely. Especially right when you leave, and now you've had 10 years to kind of process and get rid of all of that programming, to which I would say, if it was because of you that your family decided to leave, that's amazing, because you got your family out of there and now you're living happier, healthier lives.
Yeah. And now all my siblings are happy and doing well, and they don't have any questions. And, once you step back from it for a little while and you really start to see things, then I'm like, okay, I was founded in everything I knew to be true.
And I'm glad they didn't break your will, that you
Oh,
had
yeah.
that strong determination of who you were and what you wanted. And despite all of the abuse and them trying to get you to conform and break down, I'm glad that you were able to stay strong in who you are.
Yeah, that's one of my big sources of pride in myself. I definitely have a lot of insecurities, but knowing I'm not easily swayed, I feel good in that.
Yeah. So you get down to Florida. What's it like?
There's the obvious of, I grew up in New England my entire life, and now I'm on a sandbar in the ocean. Everything was different, just like physically, weather, like my first time experiencing the Florida afternoon thunderstorms. It was just like, everything was so lush and beautiful and incredible. And, we were swimming in the Gulf of Mexico and finding seashells, and it was like the only beaches I'd ever been to were on Cape Cod, which are nice, but like by comparison, going to White Sands Beach or Sanibel Island are like these beautiful places. It was like, oh my God, it was heaven.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was so just free. Like we were still supposed to do our morning and evening services and we still had our meals together, but like there was, I don't know, maybe 6 other people living there at the time. So I'd gone from this community of 90 people who are always criticizing you to like 6 people who are all off doing their own things. So then my days consisted of like my dad and I were helping some guy like rebuild an in-ground pool. I mean, we get up early and go to Home Depot, pick up our tools and stuff, and then we were just like out there in the middle of nowhere, just like repairing a pool. Like it just felt so like free. I don't know how else to say it. It was so different, so a little more laid back. We had our own little cabins. We had terrible internet, but my dad was letting my sister and I watch Walker, Texas Ranger. So we'd watch like an episode of that a night and we'd buffer for about 3 minutes and then play like 30 seconds. But it was just so exciting. I'd been a Chuck Norris fan for a little while at that point, but like it was all his really old movies. And you know, to me, Walker Texas Ranger, like I watch that show back now and I'm just like, oh, cringe. But like at the time, it was so good. It was so captivating. Like it was just incredible. And like music, I'd been listening to music that I wasn't supposed to for probably close to 2 years at that point. But just being able to just do it without having to worry about it, it was just like so nice.
Yeah. It was probably helpful to have this stepping stone before officially leaving so it wasn't such a hard break.
Yeah, for sure.
So I know that your family decided to leave. You pack up 4 a.m., just take off, and now you end up at your grandma's house, which was short-lived. So from your perspective, because your mom had mentioned the kids were a little unruly now that they're not under this harsh discipline. So what was that like?
Honestly, I don't think the kids were as unruly as she was thinking they were. I think they were unruly by comparison of the standards she'd just been living under for 11 years or 14 years.
Sure.
Yeah, it was kids being kids, and I still think they were far better behaved than most kids their age, but it was just a lot of stress at once. So yeah, I can see how small things would have been pretty nerve-wracking. I
Yeah.
don't really remember too much of that time, to be honest. Like I mowed their lawn, we swam in their pool. I just don't really remember doing anything when we were actually at my grandmother's, but it was a really short time. I do remember once we left there, like, because we moved into a campsite, like we were living in tents for a while. That's where
Yeah.
I picked up again reading books. I got really into an author named Clive Cussler, which are all my kind of adventure stories. So I was blowing through a book every couple days, I think. We were spending a lot of time at the library, doing all that kind of stuff. And then the defining moment of my pop culture experience, we spent 3 nights at one of her friend's house and I watched the Hunger Games movies. I don't know what it was, like the experiences of these children being forced to do horrific things. I just connected with those stories. It became an obsession. Like I have all the books every time a new one's like I had my finger on the button when the most recent one got released. I've listened to all the audiobooks probably 4 or 5 times a piece. I don't know. I just felt like seen when I watched those. So there was definitely a lot happened at once in a very short period of time there.
Yeah.
It was only maybe a month and a half, 2 months, but it feels like forever. I was learning. I made a Facebook account. I was just kind of learning how to interact with the world. So a lot of emotion around that, a lot of excitement, fear, insecurity. My entire life started over with a completely different set of rules at the age of 15.
And your mom had mentioned that you didn't want to do public school.
At first, no. Mostly just because of anxiety.
Yeah.
Like
which is understandable.
I'd never dealt with kids my own age. Thinking about going into a class of a couple hundred of them was just like, I tried to do a couple little things. I took because in my state, there's very good programs for homeschoolers to be involved in certain high school things like sports. I had tried taking an elective guitar class, and I only ever made it to 2 of the classes because I was just so anxious that I was almost like fainting.
Wow.
Like I couldn't even focus. My stomach hurt. I was just like dizzy. I couldn't see straight. And then I'm sitting there thinking, all these kids are looking at me and like seeing me acting like this. Like, what are they thinking of me? So I only made it to like 2 classes of that because it was just so terrifying. So I
Yeah.
did stick with schooling for a while. Yeah.
I imagine all of that seems extremely understandable because you've been raised to not have an independent thought of your own, which you did and you pushed back, but you were constantly drilled into your mind. Don't, you mean to the point of you can't even ask your parents for food or you can't tell them what you want to eat. Everything is decided for you. You cannot have an independent thought or else you're punished for it. And then you're thrown into this world where you're just supposed to be and you're supposed to make your own choices. Talk about decision fatigue. You're probably like, I don't know what to do with myself and I don't know how to interact with people because I've never been taught these social skills because it was banned. It makes total sense why it would be terrifying to go into the world, especially layering on top of that you've been taught that the outside world is evil and bad and murderous and
Yeah.
awful. And even if you are out of that cult and you recognize they were wrong, that doesn't change the programming that's been drilled into you as a baby.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Which is why I basically put all my focus into things I was interested in doing, but more again into just being productive. I was the first person in my family to get a job once we left. So for a little while, and while my dad was job searching, I was working for like $10 an hour at a farm, and I basically was the sole income for my family for a little while.
Whoa.
So what money wasn't going to like food and stuff, my mom let me sign my sister and I up for a martial arts class. So I bought us like a year of classes and we did that together. And then a little while later, I've always had a huge interest in aviation. So I went to a little event that they put on in the town I live in, where they take up children younger than 17 for like little airplane rides. I'd always just loved airplanes. So I took the opportunity to do that. And on that flight, the pilot was a flight instructor. And I got hooked instantly because like while we were up there, he like let me fly the plane a little bit and he was like, "Man, you're good at this. Like hit me up." So I did. I called him up. I ended up doing about 40 hours of flight school.
Whoa.
I had my solo pilot's license before I had a driver's license. So
What?
I was going out renting a plane, flying around by myself when I was 16. So I kind of did all that. I took the opportunity to do a lot of those things that I'd always dreamed of doing. Then it kind of got back into, okay, now I need to focus on getting a car, getting a license, like making money. So I tried to get a job that was a little better paying. I got a job at the local hardware store, and it was just too reminiscent of my experiences on a production floor. Like just the thought of standing behind the counter for 10 hours a day, I was like, I cannot do this. So the day I had like my training for that job, I sat there watching the training videos for 4 hours, and then the guy was like, "Oh, hey Emmett, you can take your lunch break." And yeah, I never came back from that lunch break. I walked out. I didn't say anything. Like I was too shy to be like, "Sorry, I can't do this." I just walked out. And that day I had $35 to my name and I bought business cards for just like a handyman. I just marketed myself as like a handyman. That when I was 16, that was like when I started what is now my business. It's gone through changes, it's grown a lot, but I started my business when I was 16. I did end up going to public school for a little while, had a terrible, terrible time of it, but played baseball and football and I got my high school diploma. When all was said and done, I finished it.
That's
I
awesome.
wasn't going to go through all that for nothing, but
What was it like going into sports where you were not allowed to play sports at all and now you're doing all the sports?
terrifying. Because I was at the point where I didn't even know the rules. Like I didn't know how
Yeah.
to play the game. So yeah, my mom was like, I don't think she wanted to be there. She was so terrified. But my first time playing baseball was just a scrimmage, and I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never stepped up to a baseball plate. I'd been to some up here in Vermont. It's like you don't get out on the field until sometimes like mid-May. So your first 2 months or so of baseball practice are inside in a gym. So you're not getting the base running experience. You're not really doing anything other than like taking batting practice off of like a pitching machine and just like, basically doing cardio. I didn't know how to run the bases. I didn't know the rules. I knew the general stuff like balls and strikes and all that. But right away, my first at bat, like I embarrassed myself so hard because I'm standing there and there was a passed ball. I just let it go. I'm like waiting for the next pitch. But I didn't know that the coach had told my teammate who was on third to steal home on the pass ball. So my coach is like, Emmett, get out of there, get out of there, get out of there. Like wanting me to back off the plate. But I didn't know what he was saying, so I just started running the first baseline. And oh my God, yeah, it was so embarrassing. I didn't know what was going on. I was just like, I knew nothing. There's a lot of getting picked on because all the kids know they know I'm homeschooled. They know something about where I grew up, but they still think I'm just like some really religious, weird kid. They know I don't know anything. They're teasing me about girls 'cause I've never had a girlfriend. I've never like kissed a girl. Like, so it's just, I'd never experienced what they call like locker room talk. It was so uncomfortable and just like I'm so uncomfortable around that. Like the way boys interact with each other out here was just like, oh, I hated it. I never wanted to be in that gym room ever. But I liked the sport enough and I ended up being good enough at playing it that like it was worth sticking it out. And I think a lot of the boys, once they got to know me, they were like, okay, this is just a kid who doesn't know anything. And like, they ended up taking me along to, team dinners and, we ended up having fun in the end. I still got some friends from that, but
yeah.
no, it was terrifying. And then after like a year of doing sports, I finally decided like, okay, I'm making friends, I'm making connections. Like I'm just going to go to school to finish out my last couple years, but it didn't work out. I ended up having to do there's like an adult learning school around here. So I ended up going through that to like finish out my diploma because I wasn't equipped for those like just like the teen drama. I don't know how to describe myself at that point, like in the eyes of other people. Like I don't know if I was like a spectacle or just like the new different thing in their world, so everyone was kind of looking at me and it just made some bad situations. So, and again, I didn't know how to interact with any of these people, so people took things I said the wrong way. I took things other people said the wrong way because I didn't know like what they meant. I didn't know the slang they used. I didn't know like any of the basics of just like peer interaction. That was terrifying.
High school is hard enough.
Yeah.
Even when you know what's going on. I mean, most teens don't know what's going on in general, but then you get a teen who really doesn't know what's going on, put him in that mix. It's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Well, you have kids now. I can hear the little bambinos in the background. So, how did you allow yourself to start dating, or how did you allow yourself to become comfortable with talking to a woman?
It went the other way. I hated hanging out with like men and other boys. It felt very uncomfortable to me. Growing up in the community, even there, like I would have rather been in the kitchen working with the women than being on the production line. I have a huge problem with authority, and growing up, the men were the authority. So I felt so much more comfortable being around the women.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that carried over into out here where I felt very uncomfortable in the locker room. I felt very uncomfortable on the sports field. But when I started meeting girls, I felt more able to like connect and interact and talk and make friends and hang out. So I ended up in this situation where all of my friends, all of the people in my text messages were all girls, and it sparked two different rumors. The first being that I was some kind of like womanizer playboy who was sleeping with all these girls, which was so far from the truth because I wasn't even in that realm. So then the people who knew that about me, that these were all just my friends, were like, oh, well, he must be gay. So that was what was getting spread around the school. Half the people thought I was some like disgusting
Oh,
playboy. The other half thought I was gay. So it was definitely hard to like. I didn't know how to ask a girl out, but I did manage. I dated a couple girls each for like maybe 1 to 2 weeks, like nothing serious. But there was just a lot of drama I didn't know how to handle. I don't know how it all worked out. I don't know if there is someone up there looking out for me or not, but I had basically dropped out of school. I was gonna not go back anymore. I was too fed up with it. But some of my baseball friends were like, "Come on, man, you have to come to the homecoming dance. Like, you've never been to anything like this. Just come hang out." I didn't have a date. I was like, I don't want to just show up there alone when everyone else has dates and stuff. They were like, "Come on, man, like we'll make it a good time. Just come." So I did, and unbeknownst to me, another girl who had dropped out of the school a couple years before I even got there had come with her friend who had also convinced her to come, and we were just the two shy people kind of hanging in the back of the crowd. So I met her, and it I mean that night it was just like I felt like I knew her already. I don't know. It was an instant click. I even had like a date planned with a girl that I'd been asking out for like almost a year for the next night. And I was like, "Look, I'm sorry. I met someone and I got to see how it goes. You've been turning me
what?
down for a year. I'm going to go out with this other girl." Um and yeah, I've been with her for 10 years now. We have 3 kids together.
Stop.
Yep.
That's so sweet. That just gave me goosebumps. Aw, that's so sweet. I can't believe that. You're sort of high school sweethearts.
Yeah, we're high school dropout sweethearts. But we did both end up going to the adult learning program together, and we finished out our diplomas. At the time they were allowing you to get it through the high school you had been enrolled in. So officially I graduated high school from that school, as has she. Yeah, we
Wow.
started our lives together. I was 17, she was 16, and we've done everything together ever since. So
How old were you when you got married?
we're still not officially married,
Oh,
but
okay.
like I said, it was like we knew each other from the night we met. So that's our
Oh, that's so
anniversary date.
sweet.
Yeah.
Well, and now you're big into gaming and streaming. So let's talk a little bit about that. I know you were talking about how you wanted to share your story through that platform, and I want people to be able to find you and support you if you choose to continue with that.
Yeah, so gaming's always been something that caught my attention. Even back in the community, my dad's first like smartphone was a BlackBerry with the scroll wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a little game on there called Brick Breaker that I played like obsessively. I've always been into gaming ever since we left. I was got very into like first person shooters. I played Call of Duty a lot. And then Fortnite came out, and that one hooked me good for years. I've been playing that game basically since it came out. The issue was at the time we were living in my dad's house. Very shortly after that, we had our first child and then our second child, and we were still living in my dad's house in like two little rooms. I had no space for anything. So the only kind of gaming console I could use was an Xbox. So I ended up going the other route. I bought an iPad Pro and I was doing mobile gaming. And that was when I first started trying to stream and make content and stuff. I was actually playing it competitively, which was wild because I'm up against people on computers and I'm playing on an iPad. And I did pretty good. But again, back to the community thing of am I being productive? And a lot of times it just felt like, no, I was not. Like, I have a hard time taking that leisure time, that time for myself. So I more or less tabled the gaming. It was something I maybe did a couple, maybe 30 minutes, played a game or something at night before going to bed. Again, I didn't really have the space to take it any further. So
Yeah.
when I built my house 2 years ago now, I finally had the space to get a computer, get set up, get figure out the whole streaming thing. And at that point, it was kind of felt like if I'm streaming, if I'm trying to grow that, which obviously can become something, like there are people whose entire living is streaming, it felt productive. It felt like I was doing something worth my time. I just worked into my schedule. I work my full work day. I come home, I have dinner, I get the kids to bed, and then I stream for like 4 hours. Right now, like, yeah, I stream the games I play. I hang out with my friends and all that stuff. But I was really hoping I could kind of grow my community and make it people who were interested in me, in my background, who wanted to know about me. So when I do kind of advertise myself in various ways, trying to get people over to my stream, I am using my story to try to entice people. You know, if you're interested in what life was like in a cult, come hang out with me and you can ask all the questions you want. So
Yeah. How can they actually find you?
So I stream on Twitch under the name of Milwaukee Talkie. I don't know if we can spell that out somewhere, but
Yeah, we'll put it on the screen.
alright, so yeah, that I stream on Twitch. I'm usually live about 7 to 11 or so p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I usually take off like one night a week, but I try to be pretty consistent with my hours and stuff, and I'm hoping at some point I can, you know, grow a little community of people that are interested and have questions and just generally enjoy hanging out. And then I
Yeah.
also make videos over on TikTok and YouTube. So
What's your TikTok handle?
they're all the same.
They're all the same everywhere? Okay. We'll put all of those in the description so it's easy for people to find you. This has been so great, Emmet. I just need
Yeah.
your Linda Listen moment.
So how does that work again?
So it's any statement that you want to say to someone who is either in a cult or leaving a cult, or if you have something sassy to say to people who are part of the cult who've pissed you off. It's whatever you want to do.
Oof, this should go a lot of ways. From the inspirational standpoint, like you will never regret taking a step back and questioning what you believe. I mean, you might find it to be that you still believe what you think you believe, but for people who are afraid to leave something they're a part of because they're afraid or whatever reason they might have to not want to take that step, like you only have to worry about yourself. People can be mad at you, people can tell you you're going to hell. It does not matter. Like, take that step back and just evaluate how you personally feel about things, because if you're believing something based on what someone else is telling you to believe, it's not your belief in the first place. To the people there who tried to break me, nah, didn't work. It went the other way. You made me more obstinate to authority than I probably was before, because I don't respond to that in the way you wanted me to. So
Nice. I love it. So good. Thanks, Emmet, for coming on. Do you have any final thoughts
yeah,
before we go?
I got 14 years of experience, so I could probably have this conversation for another 10 years. But I think we pretty much covered some pretty good basics. And yeah, I mean, I'm happy to answer anyone's questions if they want to come ask. I have many years of experience in this place and many memories that I still myself have to work through. So
Yeah.
I really do appreciate people who want to take the time to ask me that, because it's not just for your own benefit or for your own education. Like, it genuinely helps me work through how I feel about it in my own mind. So
Yeah. That's great.
that would be my thing, is ask questions. Never be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is great.
Of course. So, guys, if you're watching, thank you so much for being here. Make sure to leave those words of encouragement down below for Emmet. It means so much to us, to our guests. It boosts the algorithm. It's the best way to support the podcast. If you do want to support further, we have a Patreon at patreon.com/cults to consciousness. Our newest patrons, Ducky, Inga, and Lisa, thank you so much for joining us over there. We really appreciate your support. And if you like this video, definitely, if you have not already, check out Tamara's, his mother's interview. We'll make sure to link it and we'll place it in one of these two spots down here below. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.